Welcome, dear viewers, to our special corner of tranquility here on our YouTube channel. Today, we have a captivating story in store for you, designed to whisk you away to a world of relaxation and lull you into a peaceful slumber. So, whether you're seeking a moment of calm or simply looking to unwind after a long day, we invite you to join us on this soothing journey. Take a moment to settle in and find a cozy spot where you can truly let go. Allow the worries of the day to fade away as we embark on this storytelling adventure together. Feel free to adjust your position, ensuring you are at ease and ready to embrace the tranquility that awaits. As we begin, close your eyes and let your imagination take flight. Picture yourself in a peaceful haven, far away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. Imagine a place where stress melts away and your mind becomes a canvas for serenity. Breathe in deeply, filling your lungs with revitalizing air, and exhale slowly, releasing any tension that may linger within. With each breath, allow yourself to sink deeper into relaxation, feeling the weight of the world gently lift from your shoulders. Now, as you find yourself enveloped in this cocoon of tranquility, I invite you to open your mind and heart to the story that unfolds. Let the words wash over you like a gentle lullaby, soothing your thoughts and lulling you into a state of deep relaxation. As the tale unfolds, let your mind wander and lose itself in the enchanting narrative. Feel the stress and worries of the day melt away, replaced by a sense of peacefulness and contentment. Allow yourself to surrender to the soothing rhythms of the story as it carries you to a place of deep rest and tranquility. As we near the end of our time together, let your eyelids grow heavy and your body sink further into relaxation. Embrace the gentle embrace of sleep, knowing that you are safe and at peace in this moment. Thank you for joining us on this journey of relaxation and serenity. We hope that you found solace in this storytelling experience and that it leaves you feeling rejuvenated and ready for a restful night's sleep. Until we meet again, may your dreams be filled with tranquility and beauty. Good night, dear viewers. The snowman blinks 3 times, then slowly leaned the top 2 spheres of his body forwards. He stared for several minutes, then straightened up and peered over his shoulder. "All clear," he shouted, giving his head a brisk shake to dislodge the last flakes of fake snow. "Finally, I thought they were never going to bed," said a muffled voice from beneath a particularly deep drift. There followed a small avalanche as whoever was beneath it struggled out. After some time, a reindeer appeared, tossing its antlers and kicking out with its hooves to free itself of its snowy covering. "This is getting tiresome, on a school night too," he snorted indignantly. "It's not a school night," said a voice from behind a large, ornately decorated tree. The branches rustled, and Father Christmas stepped out. "School finished yesterday." "Oh, terrific," sighed the snowman. "I tell you, I can't take much more. That little one is vicious. She nearly shook my head clean off earlier today." "I'll check your glue in a bit," said Father Christmas kindly. "But I must round up all the presents first. There's one stuck on the top of the tree. It looks ridiculous." The snowman grumbled, then gave a jump and turned mid-air to face the tree. He craned his top 2 spheres backwards and stared up at the tree. Perched at the very top, giving every appearance of being about to tumble onto his head at any moment, was a large present. He squeaked in alarm, then bounced over to the base of the tree where Father Christmas was standing. He gave his twiggy arms an experimental stretch, grimaced as his fingers cracked, then reached out to grasp the lower branches. At a nod from Father Christmas, he began hauling on the tree, sending ripples up to the top in an attempt to free the present. Father Christmas danced around at the bottom, arms outstretched, ready to catch it. The present stuck resolutely to the treetop. At last, Father Christmas tapped the snowman on the shoulder and told him to stop. The snowman sighed and stepped back, whereupon the present rather gleefully freed itself and tumbled down, landing squarely on his hat. The impact forced the hat down over his eyes and dislodged his carrot nose. Father Christmas and the reindeer stared at each other for a full 3 seconds before the giggles started. By the time the snowman had managed to free himself from his hat, they were rolling in the fake snow, clutching their sides. Yes, yes, very funny, he muttered, digging his carrot out of the snow and jamming it back in place. He turned his back on the other two and stared out at the Christmas tree, merrily twinkling in the corner of the room. It's all right for them. They have their freedom, an unfettered view, fresh air. Father Christmas appeared at his side. He waved at the fairy, who was working her way down from the topmost branch to check on the rest of her team. She smiled prettily and waved her wand. He sighed. It would be rather nice to join them all. The reindeer snorted. I'm not going to watch their party this year, he huffed. Do they ever think of us, stuck over here, forgotten, shaken about till our antlers drop off? Father Christmas rubbed the reindeer's head absent-mindedly. It's not their fault. There's not much they can do about it. We all have our assigned roles. The reindeer snorted again, his breath fogging the glass. Well, I've had it. I want to resign. Father Christmas chuckled. I'm afraid you can't be an old chap. We're in the job for life. The snowman sniffed and hopped forwards until his carrot nose was pressed up against the glass. No, he said, quite simply. Said Father Christmas, who had become somewhat distracted by the fairy. I'm not staying in here another Christmas, said the snowman. Father Christmas blinked. What do you mean? You can't get out. We're stuck here. No. The reindeer lifted his head. His interest piqued. The snowman jumped and turned, then hopped back to the tree and the pile of presents. He took a few deep breaths, then jumped and turned back around. He leaned back against the tree, his face set with a very determined expression. Then he started hopping towards the glass at top speed. Father Christmas shouted, "No!" and stepped in front of him. But the reindeer butted him to safety. The snowman had the look of a person who wasn't going to stop for anyone, not even the big man. He hopped on, sending great clouds of fake snow flying. Then he hit the glass. The world shook for a moment, but they were used to that. Then it settled once more, the fake snow slowly landing in drifts around them. Undeterred, he bounced back to the tree and lined up again. Good grief, man! What are you thinking of? Cried Father Christmas, who was being firmly held out of the way by the reindeer. The snowman leaned back, then launched himself at the glass again, building up such a head of speed the whole world toppled briefly. Father Christmas screamed. The reindeer pawed at the snow excitedly, and the snowman cheered. Then the world settled once more. Stop! This is madness, cried Father Christmas, still struggling to free himself from the reindeer. But the snowman was decided. He was getting out whatever it took, and he was getting out tonight. Father Christmas stared in horror as he lined up again, then glanced over at the fairy on the Christmas tree. She was watching with great interest, as were the rest of her team. In fact, they were cheering the snowman on, leaping about on their branches and waving. The snowman set off once more. It seemed to Father Christmas that time slowed. He watched as individual fake snowflakes flew up, curving and spinning through the air before arching back down. Each hop the snowman took seemed to take an hour. The world trembled. The reindeer tensed, willing the snowman on. The pile of presents slipped and slid down into a drift. The snowman struck the glass at full speed, his carrot nose squishing down against his face. His hat knocked askew. The world teetered. Father Christmas became aware of a long, loud moan. After a moment, he realized it was coming from him. They stared down at the ground, so far below. It looked awfully hard. The reindeer, faced with his immediate and potentially painful future, began scrabbling backwards until he was pressed against the tree, his back end reversing upwards. Everything stopped. The world hung over the edge of the mantle for several seconds before gravity woke with a start and sent it plummeting downwards. The world was suddenly filled with noise, presents, and snow, a lot of snow. They turned end over end over end until they struck the hearth. And then all fell mercifully silent and dark. Father Christmas came some time later to feel gentle hands pulling him from a snowdrift. He staggered to his feet and stared into the beautiful face of the fairy from the Christmas tree. He tugged his suit into place and brushed the fake snow from it, mumbling to cover his embarrassment. Behind him, assorted elves, soldiers, and teddy bears were rooting through the fake snow for the various parts of the snowman. The reindeer tossed his antlers in distress. Father Christmas came to his senses and strode over to take charge. Now, we can soon put him back together, he said to the reindeer. They watched as 3 soldiers attempted to reassemble the snowman. No, the large ball goes on the bottom, the smallest goes on top. Has anyone found his carrot? He'll be terribly upset if we don't find that. A small elf scurried over, clutching it. He bowed before Father Christmas and held the carrot up to him. Father Christmas thanked him and carefully wedged it in place. The snowman's hat was discovered near the coffee table. It was rather bent, but the fairy managed to pop it back into shape. Then she carefully set it on the snowman's head. They all stepped back. The snowman blinked, once, twice, 3 times. Then he slowly looked down at the broken glass on the ground and grinned. He looked back at the assembled Christmas tree team and gave such a leap of joy, he nearly came apart all over again. It was very odd. We came down in the morning, and the children's snow globe was smashed to pieces on the hearth, said Mrs. Heathcott to her neighbor that next day. And the strangest thing, the Father Christmas, the snowman, and the reindeer from inside it were hanging in the Christmas tree. Well, surely the children put them there. Mrs. Heathcott shook her head. They were still in bed. It's a mystery. But do you know? She paused and chuckled. You'll think me daft, but I think they look happier in the tree with all the other ornaments somehow. I've left them where they are. It seems a shame to throw them out just because the globe got broken. Andrew woke and lay for a moment, just staring at the ceiling. His hand automatically reached for his phone, even though it had stopped working long ago. He sighed. It was strange how old habits endured despite circumstances, rendering them useless. He checked the calendar on the wall beside his bed and smiled grimly. Christmas Day. It hardly seemed possible. 5 months and 3 days had passed. Sometimes it seemed like mere minutes. Sometimes it seemed like eternity. He pushed himself up and swung his legs over the side of the bed, stretching and yawning. He rubbed a hand through his long hair, then pulled a band from the pocket of his shorts and tied it back. He stepped outside and looked up at the clear blue sky. Although it was pleasantly cool now, he knew that within the next 2 hours, the temperature would rise rapidly. No time to waste. He boiled some water and set about preparing. He would celebrate Christmas, no matter what. Once the feast was cooking on the spit, he made himself a rare coffee, then sat down at his desk. He noted with some alarm that his bumper of 4-pad was now over 3/4 filled. He forced himself to write every day, no slacking, even today. He worked all morning, pausing only to check on the food. Before he would allow himself to leave his desk, he checked his work, making corrections and scrawling notes for tomorrow. At last, he finished. Peering out, he could see the sun was high in the sky. The aroma of the food filled the room, and his stomach rumbled in anticipation. He checked the slowly roasting bird, then dropped vegetables into the pot of boiling water. He sat by the door staring out, his mind meandering. Last Christmas could not have been more different. The whole family had gathered at his parents' cottage. They had duck and a goose, and Mother's homemade pudding, and his father's sloe gin. And she had been there. He blinked, stung by the memory. She had been there, her hand finding his beneath the table, her smile, her tumbling golden hair. He shook his head and rubbed angrily at his eyes. No good came of reminiscing, he knew that. His appetite had gone with the memory. That was no good either. He had to eat. He had to acknowledge the day. To surrender to emotion was pointless. He took care over serving the dinner, trying to carve the way his father always did, to arrange the vegetables as neatly as his mother did. He stood back to admire his handiwork. Of course, there were no crackers, no party hats, no sloe gin. Scowling at himself for reflecting on the negative, he sat down and devoured his feast. All in all, it turned out pretty well. Later, as the sun passed the zenith and the temperature slowly cooled, he took a long walk, stopping at the top of the hill to admire the view. It was a sight that never failed to enthrall him. He sat a while, gazing at the vast forest to the east, the climbing mountains to the west. There was not another living soul around. The view was his alone. He was suddenly overcome with longing for someone, anyone, to share the moment. He stood, brushing the dust and leaf litter from his trousers. He was dwelling again. He supposed it was natural on such a day, but it was to be avoided. He turned to walk home, but something made him look back. Something was out of tune, something alien, something not in place. He frowned, straining to see the horizon, his head tilted to tune his hearing. There it was, a sound at the limit of his reach. He glanced at the tree line, then back at the sky. A dot, no more, just a dot, moving over the forest. He edged towards the trees, his eyes scouring the ground for fallen timber. He found a sturdy branch and picked it up. He waited, searching the sky. Where was it? The droning sound broke and surged as the wind carried it. It was still there, somewhere. Would it turn away or head towards him? Heart thumping, he returned to the clearing, his free hand searching his pocket for his lighter, hoping it might have one last strike left. The sound grew, less disrupted now by the wind, and then he spotted it, soaring towards him. It was a helicopter, getting larger by the second, until he could see the faded circle of its rotors. He knew he should be doing something, but he could not think straight. He was standing in the one clearing in the great jungle for at least 100 miles. It seemed unlikely the crew would not have seen him. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, battling surging emotions. Within less than a minute, it was above him, forcing him to a crouch, his free hand raised against the flying dust. At last, sense returned, and he scuttled back to the tree line, still absent-mindedly clutching the branch. He cowered behind a tree as the helicopter landed in a cloud of debris. The door opened, and a man stepped out, signaling to the pilot as he pulled his headpiece off and dropped it on the seat. He looked back at the trees and smiled, his arms stretched out to the side. Andrew shuffled into view, staring back at the man. "You're Andy? Andrew Gilligan?" said the man. Andrew swallowed. The man had an Australian accent. He nodded and shuffled a little further from the trees. The man let out a bark of laughter. "Well, what are you hiding for, mate? You got any idea how long we've been looking for you?" He turned back to the helicopter and raised a thumb. The pilot replied in kind and spoke frantically into the radio. Andrew belatedly realized he was still holding the branch and dropped it, blushing in embarrassment. "There's a certain young blonde woman who's going to be damned glad to see you," grinned the man. "Truth be told, she's been riding us blokes pretty hard." He shook his head. "She wouldn't have any talk of giving up either. Said if anyone could survive a plane crash, it'd be you." Andrew staggered. "Catherine? Catherine's here?" He stared into the helicopter, as though she might suddenly appear. "Back at base, mate, running the search op. Come on, let's get you out of here. Should be back in time for Christmas dinner." Andrew allowed the man to guide him to the helicopter. As they took off, he looked down at the jungle that had been his home for the last 5 months and 3 days. Tears formed as they circled over the hut he had built. By the time Catherine's voice came over the radio, he was crying so hard he was unable to speak to her. "It's a bloody Christmas miracle, mate, and that's the truth," laughed his rescuer, slapping him on the back. Gracie's nose was pressed against the window, her eyes wide with delight. She watched as the toy train hustled along the track, carrying its cargo of toys and gifts from Santa's workshop at the other end of the shop window to the station in front of her, where a beautifully jovial Santa waited by his sleigh. Elves lined the station, frozen in place at the handles of great trolleys piled with sacks along the platform. The reindeer at the front of the sleigh had their noses pressed firmly into bags of hay, making it impossible for anyone to identify Rudolph. But wait, who was this? Gliding in from the black star-studded ceiling on an almost invisible wire. It was Rudolph, his nose shining in a blaze of LEDs. Down he swooped, passing close enough to Santa's hat to make the fur on the trim ripple. Then away he sped, disappearing into the dark ceiling once more. Gracie's mouth had dropped open, and she gazed up at the ceiling where Rudolph had vanished, wondering if he would come back. The train pulled into the station unheeded, jolting to a halt for 10 seconds before lurching away again, still with its full load of cargo on board. With a sigh, Gracie gave up on Rudolph and turned her attention to the sparkly, dancing snowmen at the bottom of the window. They were enchanting. Every so often, the carrot nose of one of them would do a full rotation. Then his hat would pop up to reveal a present. 2 others were engaged in an endless pirouette on a glass lake, their stick hands clasped as they circled, somewhat fitfully, in a figure of 8. The backdrop of the display was an alpine scene with snow-dusted fir trees lit by thousands of tiny lights. Brightly wrapped presents were piled haphazardly at the sides, and the floor of the window was liberally coated with snow. It was, in short, magical, and Gracie never seemed to tire of it. Her mother, however, had spent more time in front of the window than she cared to recall. She tugged at Gracie's hand. "Come on, that's enough now. I still have some shopping to do." Gracie allowed herself to be dragged away from the wonderful display, stumbling along backwards as she tried to maintain her view for as long as possible. And then it was gone, lost to the crowds of hurrying shoppers, buggies, and bags. A heavenly smell wafted from the bratwurst stand at the Christmas market. Gracie peered up at the large circular stall with its swinging grill in the center. Smoke rose, carrying with it the scent of cooking sausage and curry sauce. People waited, leaning on the counter, holding 5-pound notes in gloved hands. 1 or 2 held plastic glasses, filed with steaming burgundy glue wine. Gracie squealed as her scarf slipped, one end falling down to the pavement. "Mommy!" Her mother stopped, frowning as she looked down at her small daughter. Then she smiled and scooped up the trailing scarf. "Here you go," she said, as she wrapped it around Gracie's neck. "I think it was trying to escape." Gracie nodded earnestly. "I think it wanted some sausage." "Oh, it did, eh? And what about you? I suppose Gracie would like some sausage?" Gracie beamed. "Yes, please." Her mother tugged her woolen hat back around her ears and kissed her on the nose. "Well, I tell you what, you help me find a present for Daddy, and then we'll share a sausage, okay?" Gracie nodded eagerly. She knew just what to get for Daddy. She had seen them last week when they had first visited the Christmas market. She tugged at her mother's hand and led her to a stall at the farthest end. Pulling up in front of the display of handcrafted wooden gifts, she pointed to a pair of bookends, each carved into an exquisitely detailed bird of prey. Her mother stared at them, uncertainty. "Bookends?" Gracie nodded determinedly. "He likes them. He said he liked the eagle best." "But does he need bookends?" Gracie sighed and shook her head in dramatic despair. "Of course he does. His books are always falling over." Her mother chewed her lip. It was true that her husband spent a good deal of time crawling around under his desk, retrieving dictionaries, or diaries, or journals. "I'm not sure." "He was looking at them, Mummy. He really liked them," insisted Gracie. The man at the stall watched the exchange hopefully. It had not been a good day, and the bookends were among his more expensive items. If he could sell them, it would go some way towards making up for the weak trading. "Would you like to take a closer look, madam?" he asked, proffering the eagle bookend helpfully. Gracie's mother reached out to stroke the intricate featherwork on the eagle's back. "They are lovely, but they're terribly expensive." The stallholder shrugged. "There are many hours of work in each one. They are quite unique, I assure you." "I'm not sure." "Oh, go on, Mummy. pleaded Gracie, thinking as much of sausage as her father's present. He did like them. Can you bring the price down a little? That's quite a bit more than I was planning to spend. The stallholder sucked air through his teeth. I'm almost down to cost as it is, he said, with a shake of the head. Then, seeing that a potential customer might be about to walk away, he smiled. How about I throw in the sycamore letter opener as a bonus? Gracie's mother considered the man. He had been quick with his offer. What about knocking off the price of a letter opener? The man straightened up, regarding her sadly. £8 off? She nodded firmly. Ah, well, as it's the season of goodwill. Gracie had lost interest by this point and was kicking at the leaves with her fur-lined boots. In the distance, the Salvation Army had struck up with "Hark the Herald Angels Sing," and Gracie would very much have liked to have stood beside them, singing along and clapping her hands with the band. Her mother was still haggling with the stallholder, having spotted a potential gift for one of the elderly relatives. Gracie wished she would hurry up. This end of the market was boring. The sausages and the singing were at the other end. At last, her mother concluded her business and turned away from the stall with her purchases in a large cardboard box. Gracie tried to hurry back through the market. Come on, Mummy. They're singing carols. Her mother battled after her, clutching her shopping bags and the cardboard box. The crowds were thicker than ever now, but Gracie was squirming her way through. By the time her mother caught up, she was already standing in front of the Salvation Army, clapping her hands delightedly with the band. Gracie, you mustn't go running off like that, warned her mother gently. It could be dangerous in these crowds. Gracie barely heard her. She was enraptured by the bright golden glow of the trumpets and the soaring notes of the choir. She swayed in time with the music, her eyes sparkling happily in the reflection of the fairy lights. Her mother sighed and looked up at the clock on the wall outside the department store. The parking ticket on the car would be up in half an hour. She struggled to crouch down beside Gracie, resting the box on her lap. Gracie, we just about have time to go and get that sausage if you still want one. Gracie paused, her hand held up as she listened to the last verse. Then she smiled and clapped her hands with the crowd. Okay, Mummy, the song's finished now. The queue at the bratwurst stand was long, but there were 3 people serving and 1 cooking, so service was fast. Gracie tugged at her mother's jacket. Mummy, I can't see. I can't pick you up, sweetie. I've got too much shopping. The cook looked across and smiled, leaning across the counter. Would you like to come around and choose your sausage? He asked, pointing to the swing gate on the other side of the stand. Can I, Mummy? I don't see why not, smiled her mother, as she wrestled a 5-pound note from her purse. But don't touch anything. Gracie skipped around to the gate, held open by the cook. He helped her onto a chair so she could see the browning sausages. Which one would you like? Gracie considered, tapping her chin with a gloved finger. That one, please, she said at last, pointing to a brown sausage near the middle. The cook flipped the sausage into a bun and wrapped it in a paper towel. An excellent choice, madame, he said, bowing so dramatically that Gracie giggled. He helped her down from the chair, then passed her the sausage and opened the gate for her. She skipped around to her mother, where she stopped with a frown. We need curry sauce. I have it here, said her mother, leaning down and drawing a line of sauce from the bottle. Can you manage? Gracie nibbled the end of the sausage and smiled happily. "Can we look at the Christmas window again?" "Not today. We haven't got time. But there are lots on the way back to the car." Away they walked, chatting and sharing their bratwurst. The mother juggling the box and bags, the daughter slowly smothering her scarf and gloves with curry sauce. They chatted happily, pausing by the display in the chemist's window. A stuffed reindeer gazed out at the passing crowds through crossed eyes. One of its ears had flopped, giving it a rather rakish look. At its feet were piles of presents. Gracie stared at it thoughtfully. "He's quite sweet, but the Christmas window is better." Her mother nodded. "I expect they had a lot more money to spend on their display." They carried on, stopping to admire the waving penguins in the phone shop and the rotating Christmas tree in the shoe shop. The Disney shop had made quite an effort, but even it, at least according to 5-year-old Gracie, could not match the Christmas window. By the time they reached the car, Gracie's mother was beginning to suspect her arms may have grown at least an inch from the weight of her parcels. She loaded them into the boot with relief, then helped Gracie into her car seat. As they drove from the car park, she looked at her daughter's reflection in the rear view mirror. "So, do you know yet what you would like for Christmas? You have to tell Father Christmas soon." Gracie was quiet for a while. Then she leaned forwards as far as her seatbelt would allow. "I think I shall ask Father Christmas for the Christmas window," she said quite definitely, and sat back, gazing at the passing streetlights.